Welcome back to SabreTalk. I'm your host, Brandon Bombardo. Excited about today's episode. We are here actually with Mike from AllStar CNC Products. Mike, how you doing today?
Doing great, Brandon. How are you?
Not too bad. I appreciate you coming to visit with us. I know you and Alex. Alex, unfortunately, is not here with us right now. He's out in the shop, actually.
Busy?
Yeah, he's busy. He's actually doing another video. But we're excited about what you guys bring to the table here. You know, for those who don't know, Mike, you've been in vacuum hold down gasketing for a long time, correct?
Yeah. Went to my first woodworking show in the mid-90s to help my father show some of these gasket solutions that were intending to help routers perform better, and been here ever since.
You know, it's kind of cool because I kind of joked around that we kind of come from the same, thing there, that both of us helping our fathers, and, we've been in this, both of us been in this industry a long time. And, really your specialty is how to make parts stay where they're supposed to be.
Yep.
Yep.
And I've joked around to a bunch of people. There's a lot of things I don't know when it comes to routers, even though I've been doing it a long time. I'm not a tooling expert. I'm not a gantry expert. There's a lot of stuff that kind of falls outside of my swing zone. But when it comes to vacuum performance and part hold, that's really where we can help a shop maybe perform better than they even realized they could do.
Yeah.
If you can't hold it, you can't cut it. And we're trying to get customers to hold parts better so they can cut them quicker, cut them faster, less waste, less wasted time.
Yeah. I mean, that's, as many of you know who've watched our videos, that's a famous phrase that, we say in a lot of our videos. If you can't cut it, you can't, or if you can't hold it, you can't cut it. So, it's one of those things where it's the truth. It's because no matter how great of a router we build you, it doesn't matter if the parts are moving around. Yep. At the end of the day, the machine's only as good as the material being in place. If the machine's, cutting the shape, but the parts are moving around, the shape's not going to look right, and the edge finish isn't going to be there, and there's just going to be a lot of challenges. And so, for those who want to know more about AllStar, I guess, can you share a little bit of background? I guess, where did AllStar come from? How did you guys get started? Tell us a little bit about AllStar as a company.
Sure. So my father, John Murphy, started this business way back when, even before he knew what a router was. He's a tape salesman, and he just did a lot of specialized tape products, custom stuff for folks. And one day, it just happened that somebody reached out to him looking for weather stripping tape that would last longer. They were going down to the hardware store and finding some cheap weather stripping that was just wearing out real quick, and they'd get one or two successful vacuum clamps with the weather stripping, and then it would just wear down. My father, being the somewhat expert that he was able to identify the proper foam that had recovery, that had memory, that had a closed cell nature to it, that didn't leak air, and we were off to the races. Once we found that there's a product that made a difference to these shops, once we tried to start selling to the next shop, we realized quickly that there are no two shops that are ever the same in this industry. Everyone's doing their own thing at different speeds, at different sizes, at different elevations. So there is no one size fits all. So we understand that each shop has individual questions we need to ask to figure out how to dial in what's going to work best for their particular application.
That's cool that you say that, because, we've always said the same thing about routers. There's, no two shops that are alike. So that's why we don't sell cookie cutter routers. We sell routers that are fit to the application. But you guys sell specific gasket solutions to the application. I guess, let's talk about that a little bit here. What's your top selling product? What do you guys find is the most popular product that you do sell, though, when you do go into different shops?
Most popular... it is pretty, I've looked at the numbers, and it is pretty across the board even.
Wow.
Because we have 5 product groups, I'd call it.
Okay.
We have the first, what we call a grid gasket, that goes into the grid of the router itself. In the vacuum grid system, typically there's channels, and we'll find the proper gasket to put into that channel. We've invested in the equipment to cut things to size. We can make the exact size. Every channel is going to be a little bit different. Everyone mills their channels to different specs, so we need to have different dimensions of gasket solutions to put into the table underneath that spoil board, so that we prevent that leak that may happen between the table and the spoil board.
Yeah.
And then the other 4 groups of products are meant for step 2 of a two-step process. Step one, let's gasket under the spoil board. Step two, let's gasket under the part. That's why guys are in business. So when it comes to part hold and gasketing for those solutions, we've got two products that are meant for the spoil boards, what we call our tile gasket and our onboard gasket, and then a couple for the dedicated fixtures for the production shops, an inboard gasket where you route a channel and bury the gasket, or our cover gasket, a full sheet to cut small parts. But all of them are fairly evenly ordered. Medium density, we've got different densities for the different vacuum systems that we have. But knowing what those customers need has been helpful. Talking to all those guys over the years, when we start talking to customers, how we can best assist them in their part hold.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's cool to hear you say that you have all these wide range of products and there isn't a standout. That says a lot about what you guys are doing, because that tells you how versatile this application really is.
Yeah, I mean, we have. It doesn't sound that complicated, right? We've got gasket for vacuum improvement on a CNC router. How hard is that? We have over 500 SKUs, all being ordered at different levels around the country, around the world these days. Yeah. So yeah, there is no one size fits all. Every shop's going to be doing their own thing. And we love it. I love talking to American manufacturing customers and trying to figure out what they're trying to do and how we can help them do it better.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing too, is to helping American manufacturers, and that's something we take a lot of pride in, obviously being an American manufacturer of CNC machines, but you guys bring a lot of that same philosophy to this industry. You're really big on helping the American manufacturers and keeping people's jobs here in the United States and helping people become more efficient with their jobs and with what they do. And whether it be a CNC operator who's struggling, and you try to help them look like a hero or a rock star by them finding a product, or it's, the business owner being more efficient, not spending as much time doing setups and having to go through and, waste time with materials that are moving around. But it's a cool process to be a part of, is helping companies grow and become more efficient.
Yeah. And, to get them, the days we live in, a lot of shops in this country are competing against imports. Yep. And if we're going to do it here, we need automation to be part of that, and we need shops to do things as effectively and efficiently as they can, yep. So they can make the parts as best they can. And our biggest competition, really, in this industry is lack of knowledge. Yep. There is no one else doing this. There is no one else concentrating on vacuum performance of a CNC router in this industry. That's our job. And first thing we got to do is educate the customer, yep. Let them know there are solutions that can improve your system. And then once we get that light to turn on, then we guide them towards what are the 5 product groups that is most interesting to you. But really, it's turning them on to that concept that there are different ways to do it than just downdraft flow through an MDF spoil board, that if there are challenges, there are solutions available to you.
Do you find that's the hardest part of your job, is convincing people that they could get better hold down?
Yeah, for sure. Over the last 2.5 decades of doing this, I find that even the topic of gasket solutions are often looked upon as almost like a sign of weakness, where yeah. I don't think it's a sign of weakness. If yeah. it can improve the performance of your machine and make parts better and quicker, how is that a sign of weakness? Yeah. I think it's a sign of intelligence, yeah. To utilize some of these tools that are fairly low-cost investments to return a great deal of performance out of the machine.
I think that's the biggest thing that customers can take away from this, is it's improvement. It's not changing, necessarily the technology in the machine. It's making the technology in the machine work to its full capabilities.
Full capability, and really doing things maybe more than just improving it, because yep. the flow through of an MDF spoil board, if that's working for a shop, I have no problem having yeah. them do it. Yeah. I'm not trying to slow that train down. Let's keep making those parts in the manner that you're doing it. Yep. But if there is a challenge and they have some small parts, or they're trying to increase their feed rates, how can we improve that? And you can't turn the volume of the vacuum pump up. It is what it is. Yeah. So to get more performance out of the vacuum system, there's only a few ways to do it. And sealing it and preventing leak, ultimately what Gasket does is the number one way to improve vacuum performance, short of investing in a new vacuum pump, which is going to be a much larger investment than some gasket solutions. Yeah,
off the air, you were talking to me about vacuum, and we talked about, you described it with the freezer. Maybe you can explain it to people who are watching. The freezer example, I think it explains that gasketing perfectly.
Yeah, I use the analogy often when shops call us up, and we're because we are very often the first 5, 10, 50 minutes of a conversation is often about education and try to get these ideas across and have them get to that aha moment of how is this going to work for me? And I use the analogy of a freezer, right? If your ice cream at home doesn't stay cold, somebody may say buy a colder freezer. Same guy that's going to tell you to buy a bigger vacuum pump, where I think if your ice cream isn't staying cold, let's just put the lip on the freezer door, make sure that's working properly, and prevent the cold air from getting out of the freezer. And for a router shop, let's prevent the vacuum pressure from getting out of the whole environment. Let's keep everything contained and not get any leak, because leak is really the problem. Everything that leaks, psst here, psst there, that never comes back into the system. So you got to get everything contained and airtight, and it changes. It's not just improving the flow through of an MDF spoil board. It's really changing the concept. We're vacuum clamping, and we get a whole different science and far superior use of the vacuum pump that you have with just a couple of tweaks in how we're using it.
And I think that's the biggest thing for people to take away from this is that AllStar isn't here to tell you how to do, vacuum clamping differently, if you will, right? It's just how to make it more efficiently. Like the technology of vacuum is the technology of the pump, right? I mean, the pump is ultimately still doing the work, but it's not going to do the work if the air is not getting to the part. And that's ultimately what you guys are just trying to do, is make it more efficient. It's basically taking what you're already doing and just making it better.
Yeah, I mean, so many shops over the years, we hear them do all these things. So we put gasket in the table under the spoil board. We've painted the edge of the spoil board. We've watched the gauge on the machine, and none of these things relate to part hold.
Correct.
Like, how is the part being held?
Correct.
The gauge on your machine gives you a number of what the vacuum is performing at, but that's not the vacuum pump, or the vacuum gauge is not at the pump, or the part rather. Sorry. So the more the customers can get their head around, we got to get the vacuum pump power all the way up to the part, and there's a lot of places where it can escape, but if we can seal all those spots and make a really airtight mentality from the pump to the part without any leak, that's where we change seismically the ability to hold parts.
And a lot of you that have watched this or watched episodes and know me, you guys know I'm into racing and auto racing, and obviously setting up race cars is a big part of what I do. And one thing I've always explained to people, it's the same kind of aspect, is you can have the most perfect setup ever on the scales in your race shop, right? We set race cars up all day long, and guys are like, the scale numbers are perfect, and they go out to the racetrack and the car is absolute junk. It doesn't work. It's slow. It doesn't work. The driver's complaining, but the crew doesn't want to change the car because the numbers are perfect. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how perfect those numbers are if it's not working for the driver.
For sure.
And it's the same in this scenario. It doesn't matter how perfect your vacuum gauge number reads at that pump if the parts are moving around. Yeah. So at the end of the day, just because you're getting good vacuum from your pump doesn't mean you're getting good vacuum at the actual cutting surface.
And the part is the most important thing in the shop.
Correct.
If you're running that router, the part is why you invested in the router.
Correct.
Not the spoil board, right?
Yep.
Who cares about the spoil board?
Right.
But why is that the thing that we're paying the most attention to?
Correct.
So if the part is where we start to lay the attention from a vacuum perspective, that's why for a lot of guys, they've never done this.
Yep.
So there's some baby steps needed to say, okay, I get it. All right, now we need to account for that gap that exists between the spoil board and the part. It might be small, but if there's a gap there, whether it be because of warp or the variation in the material, there's vacuum loss occurring there.
Yep.
And if we can eliminate that loss, we just get a whole different performance out of that machine, and that's where guys are getting more parts in less time.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's the goal at the end of the day, is more parts in less time. And for your recommendation, okay, if you have a consumer here, there's somebody watching us right now, and they're wondering, how do I know if I have a problem? Where do you start, telling them to look first? I guess, what's your first go-to when you tell somebody to understand their hold down? Where do you start?
Well, they usually tell us before we can tell them.
Okay.
Right? Because our phone rings over the last 25 years when customers are having part hold challenges, right?
Yep.
Nobody calls us when they're having no problems.
Yep.
They want more vacuum performance, and that's how they come across our name. So, and what they tell us is part movement, or the need for onion skins and tab cuts. How do I eliminate that? Or I got vibration, an uneven edge, maybe tool breakage. You know, all these things that happen as a result of poor vacuum performance. Those are the kinds of things that they report to us and ask, how can I eliminate these headaches? And it usually comes down to holding that part better, vacuuming it better, so that the machine can do what it's being tasked to do, which is cut parts.
And and that's the cool thing about what Mike just said is, hopefully as you're watching this, you're thinking like, have I been breaking an abnormal amount of bits? This might be why. Like you might have enough vibration in your part that it's literally on an ultrasonic level, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what I try to explain to people is your eyes sometimes don't react fast enough to what's really happening. And I've always said that to people. It's like sometimes you watch something in slow motion and it's like, wow, that happened and I didn't even realize it happened. But, a lot of times the part could vibrate, or move suddenly. And
that's what snaps the bit.
It snaps the bit, exactly. Yeah. But they don't realize it because they don't see that part move. But it's like you have to be aware that if you're noticing that you're breaking a lot of bits, but I have all the speed right, the feed rates right, and if everything else is right and you're still breaking, it might be part movement.
It very well could be.
And the same thing for the other things that you've mentioned there is there's so many variables that somebody needs to take into consideration outside of just the machine itself. And part vibration can wreak havoc on your edge finish. Yep. But people want to blame the machine right away, right? Oh, it's the machine. Something's going on with the machine. It could simply be your part's just moving around. And obviously, if the part's moving while the bit's trying to cut it, it's going to leave a chatter mark. It's going to leave an issue there. So you have to take into consideration these other things when you're having problems on your machine. And sometimes it just simply comes down to if you had better holding power, you would have better results.
Yeah, and that's what we try to get into our customers' experience with the machine is, a lot of it is outside of their knowledge zone or something they can see. I mean, vacuum performance is an invisible task, right? You can't see airflow leaking.
Yeah.
I wish airflow leak could come out as like purple smoke that we can all see where it's going. But the fact that we can't see it, we have to envision where is this leaking.
Correct.
And if we can stop that leak, then the vacuum pump that you have over there, it is what it is. I mean, you can't turn it up, but it's very powerful. It can do great things, but we just have to harness its power as best we can.
Yeah, I've actually seen over the years of doing this, I've seen some people do a smoke test on their vacuum. And, what they'll do is they have a smoke machine, if you will, and they basically make smoke go around the table as they're running it, and they can see where that smoke is being drawn in at.
And that's a leak.
Yeah, and that's a leak. If it's pulling the smoke into the material, it's pulling raw air into the material, so that's why it's not creating suction.
Yep, and LDF, MDF boards, I was mentioning earlier that it's a magical tool for this industry because we can draw a vacuum straight through there to hold parts on routers, but because it is able to draw a vacuum straight through there, it's also usually the number one cause of leak because we're leaking through the tool channels, through the side, through any open area of it. So as wonderful as it is to allow us to make parts on routers, it's also a spot that needs to be addressed sometimes when you're trying to prevent leak.
Yeah, for sure. And AllStar, you guys have been in the industry. How long have you been around now?
I started in 98, and I think my old man started in about 94.
Okay. So, I mean, you guys are brand new to the industry, of course, looking at that. You guys haven't done this very long. But no, I mean, when you think about that, that's a lot of experience. I mean, this isn't like your first time around the block. You guys have seen probably every scenario in a router.
And like I say, that's whatever that is, 25 years of experience. And the people that we are dealing with are the ones that are having vacuum challenges. Correct. Right. We don't talk to anybody else.
Correct.
So we've heard all the different stories, all the different materials, all the different sizes. A wide range of history in dealing with these shops that have challenges.
Yeah. And the nice thing about ShopSabre is, we've partnered with AllStar because we understand that a lot of what we do works for the majority of our users, and we've been really successful with it. But we also understand we have a lot of challenges too. We have things where customers, we were talking about it earlier, that I have scenarios where customers call me up with these wild ideas of things they want to route. And my biggest concern always has been, how do I hold it down? Yep. And your guys' product has really solved that for me. I mean, we've been using your guys' product for several years now in terms of the actual gasket material. Many of you have seen it in our videos where we did I think it was a banjo or a guitar neck. I can't remember which project it was, but Bob talked about it in that video that we're using AllStar gaskets, material, but we used it just to create a actual fixture. But since then, you guys have come up with some new products, the tile gasket, some things there that have just accelerated your capabilities. And for us, there's always been a need. I mean, as far back as we go, I mean, we did an episode earlier here on SabreTalk with Router Bob, and Router Bob was talking about his experience in the industry. And I would argue that Router Bob probably is one of the most knowledgeable people in the CNC industry. He has the most, he has the most experience in this industry. In fact, he revolutionized this industry for a lot of what it is. But Router Bob, when he was back with, his previous, jobs, he had mentioned they used gasket on everything because vacuum wasn't what it was today. They had to gasket.
I was talking about with him today. Back then it was all gasket, and maybe with the advancement of bigger vacuum pumps and machine advancements,
Correct.
maybe get away from that a little bit. But the science of what Gasket provides still exists. I mean, this
Correct.
is a science that is available to everybody. And as long as they're aware of it, like I say, our biggest competition is lack of knowledge.
Correct.
And I just want customers to know that if they are having vacuum-related challenges, there are tools available that can harness the power of that vacuum to hold on to those parts.
Well, I feel like we've come full circle in vacuum, if you will, because it was exactly Bob, would use to gasket everything. I mean, you had to gasket every part, and you couldn't nest things out. They didn't have nested manufacturing when he started. Then nesting came along, and people started using, flow-through fixturing, where you just use the spoil board on the table, and people would gasket under the tabletops. Well, then we got to the point where a lot of us as CNC manufacturers perfected that to where you didn't always have to gasket that anymore. So people got so used to not gasketing that they've lost track of the fact that there's still a need for gasket in applications.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of back to where you guys have, we realize that this is a problem. Let's develop another product. And you guys came out with what I would consider it as is, I like to say it's the nested manufacturing gasket is what it is really, because you guys with that tile gasket have given people the ability to still use all of the benefits of nested manufacturing, but all of the, true scientific gains of gasketing.
Yeah, and we even started calling them the nested base tiles because it was intended for that that portion of the industry, always changing, and what the nested base tile, what we now call the tile gasket, does is when you lay it out on your spoil board, it seals so much of it. It covers 95% of the top of the spoil board, prevent the leak there, and the fact that all the holes in there creates little suction cups on the sheet, and guys can just cut sheet after sheet after sheet, part after part on that tile gasket without the worry of vacuum loss coming through the spoil board.
Well, that's the thing that, like when you look at a ShopSabre as an example, if I start up one of our pumps on our table with the standard MDF spoil board, I can put my hand on the spoil board and I can feel the air moving through that spoil board. There's enough airflow for that. But when I put your guys' tile gasket on that same spoil board and I put my hand on there, it physically leaves a mark on my hand. Like it actually leaves little dimples on my hand where those holes are because it's increased the flow that much, more to where my hand is at. And I think that is really what we're demonstrating. It's not that your vacuum system isn't working. We're not here to tell you that you have a problem.
Yeah.
We're here to tell you you could have it so much better.
And what the tile gasket does is proves your vacuum system is working.
Correct.
Because look what it's capable of doing.
Correct. Exactly.
And if you don't use some kind of gasket solution and that flow through mentality, there's just a lot of wasted flow.
Correct.
And it just kind of disappears.
There's a variable you can't control.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I try to point out to people is that in anything you do, you want to control as many of the variables as you can because then you get a guaranteed outcome.
Yep.
With vacuum, the less you're controlling the airflow, the more variable that exists and the chances of failure.
Yep.
You could do 20 sheets in a row, but if the density of one material is different than the next, the other 19 sheets,
That's your variable.
There's your variable, right? So as you start to go through it, let's concentrate the air to the parts so that variable has less of an effect.
Yeah. And how much are we losing? A variable. And so to harness that that vacuum and prevent the leak as best we can, wherever we can, that's what's really going to dial it into the part and get maximum hold on it.
One of the biggest benefits for me on this that I want people to think about is your spoil board. With this tile gasketing, we have, you and I have talked about this at great lengths today, but we've found that, I shouldn't say we, I shouldn't take any credit for this. This is not me at all. This is you guys. But we've been discussing it, and
it's always a we.
It's always a we, right? But it's not, I promise I'm not French. I'm not talking French here. It's really about you guys. But you guys have found that 500-ish hours, is that correct, right? Am I reciting that correctly? 500 hours on a single application.
For the tile gasket.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. Now, human error exists.
There's a lot of variable to get to that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
This tile gasket material is a 1/16 of an inch thick and lays out on top of your spoil board. So there's not a great deal of window there.
Correct.
But what we want our customers to do is cut through the part, set your Z to cut through the part, eliminate onion skins and tabs, and just don't go through the gasket so you don't expose that MDF spoil board underneath, because the tile gasket is doing two things at once. It's sealing 95% of the top of the spoil board, so we're not leaking through the tool channels and through the overall surface of the spoil board, but then also has those clamp concepts, the little vacuum cavities. Vacuum, to me, is not a vacuum cleaner that we're trying to suck the air down. It's vacuum lack of air, and gas Gasket, whatever solution you use, any one of the 5 product groups that I mentioned, each one of them defines the space that the vacuum pump will pull the air from, and then we have air pressure differential, and that's the science that we take advantage of.
And that's what I love about it all is there's so much science behind it, but it's so simple. It's so simple.
I couldn't do it if it was hard.
I was gonna say the same thing. Like for me, it's simple enough that I can actually do this, because I'll tell you what, if it was any more complicated, I might not be your guy. But the thing about that is when you look at that, going back to that number, 500, hours of running time, which when you think about a 40-hour work week, that's 3 months.
Yeah,
that's over 3 months of the same spoil board. I challenge a lot of you to think about how often do you have to resurface your spoil board.
Yep.
I'm going to be willing to bet without gasket retail, you're resurfacing a heck of a lot more frequently than every 3 months.
Well, every shop's going to be a little bit different. We've talked to shops that, this is no exaggeration. I've talked to a shop, they fly cut their spoil board 4 times a day. I mean, it must have been after every 2 or 3 sheets.
Yep. I know that I have customers that have told me they are doing the same thing.
And, I always reserve the right to be wrong about something, but my vision is that they have to fly cut because they're trying to improve their vacuum performance.
Yep.
They're cutting into the spoil board, and then all the wormholes create more vacuum leak, and then the next sheet they throw up is having less vacuum performance, so they fly cut to get everything flush up against each other, thinking that's the best way to do vacuum. When 2 things are flush up against each other, it's because you get less leak.
Correct.
That's what makes it better. But if we gasket everything, there's no leak. So in a way, it's almost like fly cutting every time, because that gasket is what's filling the gap that exists between those 2 surfaces.
And the thing to think about here is a lot of times, the more frequently somebody has to fly cut, it's a lot of times related to improper setup, to be completely honest. I mean, it's their Z depths are too aggressive. You're cutting too deep into that spoil board, and you're creating leakage. So your goal is to eliminate that leakage.
Yep, is to eliminate that, but those are the exact kind of shops that we have to tell them, hey, you're doing a lot of fly cutting, it sounds like. Based on the questions we're asking, the answers you're giving us, it sounds like you're doing a lot of fly cutting. So if we supply this tile gasket to you, you got to change your ways.
Correct.
Because you can't just go too deep into the tile gasket and fly cut. Z-depth control is crucial to getting those 500 hours. If you start cutting through it, you can't just fly cut it fresh. So really the shops that figure out the best way to calibrate their Z properly and keep those tile gaskets as intact as they can, they're going to get the big hours out of it.
And that's what we try to explain. I mean, that's where the benefits of like our Fave 3, as an example, on our tool changer, we came up with our new Fave 3. This is why we've come out with some of these features, is because our goal is that you set your tools up one time. You set them up, you put them in your tool changer, you can spend the time getting them absolutely precise. And when you're said and done, you don't have to mess with them again. And that allows you to do things like this, where you put a spoil board on that is going to be, honestly, for us, I recommend setting your depth as, 2 thousandths past your material.
Yeah.
You don't need to go super deep. You just got to get through the material.
A lot of times what our shops will do, they'll lay out their tiles for the first time and then set their tooling to the top of the gasket to set their Z.
Yep.
And then run a program, test run, and leave the onion skin. Yep. And then caliper that onion skin and reset their Z by that much. So they know exactly how much they're leaving behind. Go a little bit deeper by that, and they dial it right in, because the gasket it's foam. It's going to compress, and how much it compresses is going to vary from shop to shop. The weight of the material, the strength of the vacuum, the elevation, blah blah blah. All of it adds up to how much is it going to compress. It's going to change. So, but once in your shop, it should be pretty consistent. So they'll suck it down, figure out how much they need to set it by, and they're off and running.
And this is where it comes back into, again, using a precise machine still matters in this situation, because this is where ShopSabre comes back into the fold, is that we know our machine's accuracy is there. We've spent a lot. I mean, you've seen it today. You walk the facility. We spend a lot of time and money in equipment that most shops don't own. You saw our mill. It's a pretty impressive. We have a $1.8 million aerospace mill that gets these machines precise.
It was busy working out there.
Yeah, and it was busy. It's not sitting idle. So as that machine's running, we're building more precise machines. Well, we do that because we want our machines to be able to operate in a higher tolerance environment. Well, by being able to hold tighter tolerances, we can do things like this, where we can put vacuum gasket in place and know that we're going to get a lot more hours out of the vacuum gasket because the machine can hold the tolerances. Some machines may not be capable of holding a 500 hour duty cycle on that.
And I can tell you, the machines that hold a tighter tolerance on whatever they're doing perform better with vacuum.
Correct.
Just because there is more tolerance, and the tighter the vacuum just performs better because there's less gap, there's less variance.
Yep.
So anything that has tight tolerances are already 2 steps ahead of the game.
And that's that's the big thing here is that there's so many variables, and hopefully that's what you're picking up today as you're watching this episode, is that it's not just about you can have the greatest vacuum pump in the whole world. It doesn't matter if the rest of the stuff's not working. And the same can be said for the gasket material. Just throwing gasket material on top of your machine isn't going to solve the problem if you're doing it wrong. You still have to do it right. So there's a whole lot of education that has to go into this. But the thing about Mike and his team is, I will say there's not any more committed people in this industry than you guys when it comes to educating people on proper vacuum hold down.
No one working harder out here to get Shop's vacuum systems to work better.
I will agree with that 100%. I mean, you guys have spent the whole day. These guys are rock stars. They flew in here. They've spent the entire day with my team. They've been going through it with my tech team, my sales team, my parts team, educating everybody on the proper utilization of this gasket kit. So when we sell it to our customer, you, the consumer, you get what you need. We're not selling you the wrong thing. We're not setting it up wrong. And now we've done a training video today. We actually created a video. In fact, Alex is downstairs right now.
I think he's probably still doing it.
Still doing it. He's creating that video with my team. They're downstairs right now shooting another video on how to properly set the gasket kit for ShopSabre on the ShopSabre. Mm-hmm. And it's those type of things that make this a really, really unique situation, is because anybody can sell you something.
Yeah.
There's so many companies out there that are just here to sell you something, and good luck. You guys are really about selling you it so you're successful with it.
We're not here selling snake oil. We want, and we're not trying to sell it to the shops that don't need it. Some shops don't need this stuff, and we're not trying to get them to get it. But what we're trying to get out is the knowledge that if there is improvement needed on the current vacuum system that you have, that there are tools available to you.
And that's exactly it. I mean, hopefully today's episode, it gave you some insight on if you're having some problems out there, if you're wondering how you can improve efficiencies, that there's still solutions out there. We have a lot of solutions here. ShopSabre sells all of these solutions, so you can contact our parts department. Our parts department will gladly go through and offer you the right solution for your machine, whether it's 4x8, 5x10, 6x12, whatever size machine you have. ShopSabre has a solution for its products. But if you don't own a ShopSabre, you own somebody else's machine, you can go to AllStar's website. AllStar has a wide variety of products there. You can get a bunch of stuff from them, and obviously their team is always willing to help you. Check them out on YouTube. You guys have a ton of training videos. Yep. You have a ton of example videos.
Half of what we do is train. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to spread the knowledge. And if the knowledge makes sense, then we can spread the product.
Yep.
But we got to spread the knowledge first that these tools are available to you, and every shop being a little bit different, what they're doing. Our website, AllStar CNC, shows some of the different concepts, and sometimes it's up to the shop to figure out which one's going to be the best fit for their applications.
And that's the truth. At the end of the day, we can tell you all about this. We've shown you a lot of stuff. You'll be able to check it out on our website. We got some new videos coming out, but none of that matters if you don't believe it. And you need to be the one to truly understand how it works and how it will fit into your business, because we can tell you everything, but you are ultimately the ones that have to use it in your business. And I'm a firm believer. I will say, I've been doing this a long time. I'm a guy that let's call a spade a spade. I'm a guy that was resistant to this change for a while. We've talked many times, Mike, and I've felt that I wasn't sure it was the right fit for us. But after seeing it and working with it and spending more time with you and talking to a lot of our customers who have jumped in and tried it out, there's a benefit for everybody. It's not that you're having an issue with something that already exists. It's solving problems that otherwise are unsolvable. There's certain parts that they're just not going to hold down without some assistance.
No, and those are the customers we're here to try to help. The guy that doesn't have problems on the big parts that he keeps making for the last 15 years, keep it up.
Keep going. Yeah,
going.
Exactly.
I'm proud of you, guy.
Yeah.
But for the folks that are doing the challenge parts, that they want to have the same level of success as the guy doing the big parts,
correct.
We can do that for you.
And software's not making it any easier on people, the operator. It seems like as software gets more sophisticated, it also makes the process more complicated, because as these nests get more creative, we've found that a lot of the softwares now are pushing parts to the outside of the sheets that are really small.
The small parts out to the edge of the table that has the least amount of vacuum performance.
Because they fit the best there. I mean, that's the reality is we understand what they're doing. The algorithm says these small parts fit around the outside easier because they're small. Mm-hmm. The problem is science says there's the least amount of air out there. Yeah. So we got to find a way to hold those parts.
And I get that's what the software does, but me sitting in this chair,
Correct.
I'm always looking at things from a vacuum perspective. That's the only thing I do. So from a vacuum perspective, we want those small parts to the inside, but until we get them to make a change to the software, we got to address it in another way. And how do we get better vacuum performance out by the edge? and it's all the kind of tools that we supply.
Yep. And for any of you guys that buy big tables, I've always told people, we come from the modern world where let's buy as big as we can, right? We got to have big trucks. Yeah, exactly. We got big trucks and big houses, and everything we do is big. Yeah. The problem is some of the stuff you do is small. And so you have these massive tables with small sheets on them and small parts, and people don't realize that actually creates a problem. Yeah. It's hard to hold those parts down. And that's where these gaskets, and certain fixtures come into place, is that now you can force the air to the part even on big tables.
Yep. And it's just sealing in and preventing that leak and get that big, massive area that is all potential for leak.
Correct.
Down. I mean, leak is inevitable.
Yep.
I use the analogy often. It's like holding water in your hands. You can squeeze as tight as you want. At the end of the day, the water is gone.
Yeah.
And vacuum is going to be the same way. It's just going to disappear. But the more we can figure out a way to maybe put some rubber gloves on, maybe that'll hold it a little bit longer, and take that same kind of concept of how do we prevent that loss from the table.
Yeah, we can't stop 100% of leak. We know that. There's no way to do that. But any amount that we can reduce it will improve your production with the machine.
Every bit. Somebody would say, is it worth it to paint the edge of the spoil board? Yeah. Because that's preventing leak. Is it going to make a difference on your part, success or failure of holding it? I'm not sure. How close are we to holding it?
Correct.
Because if we're a long way from holding it, painting the edge isn't going to make a difference.
Correct.
But if we're close, that little bit of improvement could be, the difference.
Yep.
And if it's not the difference, we got to prevent more leak because leak is the problem. And if we can eliminate all of it, that is the difference.
Correct. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you said, there's certain solutions for certain applications, but there's always a solution. That's what I've told everybody. It's just finding the right solution. And honestly, Mike, I appreciate you joining us today. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. I've had a lot of fun today just watching your product work on our table. We build a table that's built for performance, and to see the performance improve simply based on a few things that we did. We were holding parts today that historically we have not been able to hold, and it's pretty fun to see that stuff happen. And obviously we'll have some videos coming to show this stuff off. But again, if they want to learn more about your product, where do they go?
AllStarCNC.com. We also have some videos on YouTube. Search AllStar CNC at YouTube, and they're bound to come up.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I appreciate you joining us today. Yeah. Hopefully you've had fun here at ShopSabre.
Loved it. Love seeing the facility. You guys doing a great job here, and appreciate the opportunity.
Perfect. I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll have another episode coming in the future.
Thank you.